All right, so in the last one, we learned a little bit about the different types of variables, the string, the integer, the float, and the boolean. And in this one, we're actually going to put them to some use. So one of the first things I want to do over here is we're going to go ahead and create a new file. We're going to save it as, get back over here to my Python file. All right, so we got the hello and the hello1 file in there. We're going to call this one user info. All right, so user info, make sure that it has the .py extension on it by saving it as a type Python file. Click save, and we have userinfo.py. All right, so I'm going to create some variables up here that you would get from users. So I wanted to show you something here. I've already got some of these entered. Of course, first name, last name, address, city, state, and then prompting them for each of those here with an input. When you're assigning variables, one of the main things that you have to remember is you can't use words that are already taken. So you can't, like you couldn't use input, because input is already its own thing in here, its own function. So you wouldn't be able to do input over here. If you tried that, as you can see, it shows up in orange and it tells you, hey, I already got something over here. So you really have to watch that. Now, the next line that I'm using on here is zip code. So if I hit the backspace and type in zip, which I would do, but as you can see, it also has a function called zip. So I'm having to type out zip code, and then we'll continue on to set it equal to input zip code and so on. All right, so I've got a name, address, city, state, zip, and their age. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this is to show you that we need to force age to an integer. The rest of these you could pretty much leave as strings, because the only time you have to force it to an integer is if you want to work with it mathematically. So once again, let's look at what we have. Right now we're just creating the variables. We've got a F name for first name, L name for last name, and we're prompting them enter first name or input first name, input last name. Then we have an address, input street address, input city, input state, zip code, and age. Now I could run this code right now and it would run through here and let me enter all that stuff and assign it, but in my code I want something else to spit out afterwards, and what I want is almost like a mailing label, and I want to print it in that type of format. So down here in my code, I'm going to enter some print functions. All right, so I've got my print functions in here, and I've got as many as I want. And the reason I put 4 in here, because on the first line, I'm going to put their first name, a space, then their last name. So if I run that, if you remember from earlier, we wrap them in curly brackets. So I open curly bracket, F name, and then close the curly bracket, do a space, and then do the same thing for L name. So on this first line, it should print out their first name and last name. On the second line, of course, we're just going to put the address. So we do the same thing, but we just put address in there. And then for the third line, we're going to do the city, state, and zip. And of course, when we do city, we're going to put a comma in after it. So that would look something like this. All right, so city, comma, state, space, zip code. And the last one, I want to check if the person is over 18. So I'm going to put in here is 18. And then I can use age mathematically in here. Of course, I can't do it right now, if you remember from the last video, because I haven't made this age an integer yet. But if I put in here just like that, all right, within curly brackets, and then put age is greater than or equal to 18, then I should be able to run that and get true or false. So let's go ahead and run it without putting an integer or casting it to an integer right here and see what it does. So we'll save it. And once again, you don't really have to save it because it saves your work if you're working in this environment, and it's going to run whatever code's in this file if you click this one. So let me run this, and I'm going to go ahead and start entering this information. So my first name is David. Last name, I'm just going to go with Jones. And then address, 1234 Main Street. My city, we'll call it Lucky. And that is in the state of Ohio. And I don't know what the zip code is there, so we'll make up one. And then my age. And I'm going to put that I'm 17. And if we run this, of course, we get the stuff back. We get the David Jones, 1234 Main Street, Lucky, Ohio. Nice formatted layout there. And then in the type error, it talks about the greater than or equal sign is not supported between instances of the string and int. So what I want to do now is go ahead and clear this screen and then go over here and cast this to an integer. And once again, if you remember, you got whatever you want to cast inside of parentheses for the casting. All right, and you can also cast a float as well. And of course, input, it's got its own parentheses, so you got to make sure that you have double parentheses out here or a closing parentheses for each of the previous ones. Alright, so let's rerun this. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, because that's just, once again, good habit to get into, because other IDEs don't always save your work. Then we rerun this. Of course, it runs the file. Let me go ahead and go through this again. Alright, so now you can see we get everything that we wanted, and we get a false on is 18. And if I ran it again and use something that was 18 or above, and we'll just use 18. So let me go through all these again. now you can see you get the nice layout and it returns true. Alright, and since this is one of the shorter videos, I'm going to go ahead and add one more thing in here, a nice little piece of information. If you wanted to actually do some better formatting, because as you can see, as soon as I put the age in down here, it's all butted up right against there. So if I wanted to put a space in there, I could always add another print line over here and then add something called a \n. So if you do that, or was it /? I'm sorry, /n. That's one of the two. We'll go with the \n, see if that works. Alright, so if I rerun this, I went ahead and cleared my screen, go through all the information again. Now you can see we get some spacing in there. Alright, and that's just by adding one \n, and all that is in here is a carriage return or a line feed, whatever you want to call it, and you can add them wherever you feel you need them. Python normally takes care of it for you, like we didn't have to put one in here. Okay, some things, like if you get into using C and things like that, you would actually have to put those in here, but Python doesn't do that. For each print function, it automatically adds a line feed at the end of it. Alright, so hopefully you got to see some new things. Like I say, this is just more formatting. It's not really a lot of calculation. This was the only actual calculation that we did down here. But this is to show you that you can make your code, at least your output, very visually appealing to the users. Because if I didn't format these like this and just put them all back to back, it would just be one long string, which may be what you want. So thanks for watching, and we'll get into some more stuff in the next video.